email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or news.
The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
Today we're diving deep into something we all deal with every single day, people. The ones we lead, the ones we work with, and the ones who drive us a little crazy. My guest today is someone who's helped millions of people around the world understand human behavior in a whole new light. Thomas Erikson is a behavioral expert, best-selling author, and the mind behind the international phenomenon Surrounded by Idiots. His work has been translated into over 40 languages, sold millions of copies, and changed the way we talk about communication, leadership, and personality. We're going to explore why we clash, how we connect, and what we can do to become better communicators, leaders, and team players. Thomas, welcome to the show. I've been looking so forward to this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So I like to think of all the people who come on my show as superheroes, and everybody knows that every superhero has an origin story. So, what's yours? How did you go to writing this book, and, what's your backstory?
Oh, wow. Let's dive right in, right? Well, I was like many people who claim to be some sort of success. I struggled for a long time. I'm one of these overnight successes that took like 20 years to succeed with anything, really. But there is actually an interesting story, and it is that I always dreamed to be a writer. I wanted to be an author. I wanted to write books. Long story why that was. Never mind. So I wrote for 20 years. I had Stephen King as my. If I ever had some sort of an idol person, maybe it was Stephen King then, because I really don't know. I liked horror when I was a young man. So I was writing and sending it into all the publishing houses, and they just, no, please, no, don't call us and we won't call you, kind of attitude for 20 years. But I was working as a management consultant, working with the profiling and disc and drivers and so on. So then I got this brilliant idea. Why don't I combine work with pleasure? So I wanted to write about things that I actually do know something about, namely behaviors and communication and leadership and so on. So that's a funny story. I went to my then publisher and said, hey, I got this brilliant idea. I want to publish a book about communication, about behaviors, personality styles, and so on. And they looked at me and said, what are you talking about? You're a thriller author, because I managed to actually be published after 20 years. And they said, what is it? I said, it's going to be about 4 colors. It's a great system. It's going to be called Surrounded by Idiots. And I presented them to my cover, which is my own design, the book you just held up there. And they looked at me with horror in their eyes and they said, this is the stupidest thing you ever come up with. Forget about the whole. Firstly, it's a stupid title. It's an ugly cover. Don't do it. Just scrap the whole idea. But I am kind of persistent / stubborn. So I didn't listen. So I had to self-publish the bloody book myself, which I did. And then, well, everyone said I was shopping around basically in the whole industry, and they all said the same thing. You're the idiot. But I didn't pay attention. So that's kind of the story how it came by. So I was sort of seeking, I don't know, revenge in a way. So I had to write the damn book, which I did. And after a year, we got it into the airports, and it was a big success and so on. I saw you. I'm going to do an ego thing here, Clint, if that's okay. You said 40 languages. It's actually 70 languages, which actually makes me one of Europe's, one of the world's, number one in Sweden, most translated authors still alive. Still alive.
Wow.
I have to add that one on top of things. Yeah, so
I would definitely
the ego story.
I'm sorry.
No worries, because the deals are coming in fast. So, but the great thing about that is it's not for the ego. I'm joking a little bit because I'm from Sweden, so I can't boost my ego too much because we don't. But it's a funny story because people seem to pick it up, the message in the book about communication, and I get emails from literally every continent, people saying, yeah, that's the way it is. Yeah, my wife is like this and my boss is like that. You're describing my husband exactly the way he is. It's so fantastic. So thank you. And that for me is the biggest reward, to actually make people think and ponder about behaviors. A CEO called me just this morning, actually Swedish time, and said, if I had read this book 10 years ago, I would have saved myself so much pain. because, he thought he was a born leader, and he said, I have a couple of personality traits that isn't very charming. I understand that now. So there it is.
Well, despite what they said, Surrounded by Idiots, I think is a very catchy title. How'd you come up with it?
Well, it's not very complicated. We've all been in those meetings, right? Haven't we? Sitting around a table, probably at work, 10, 12 people. There is an agenda. You sit there, you run your arguments, you listen to people, you try to catch up, and you realize that no one else is following the agenda. And after a while, you start to think, what is going on here? And when you leave the room, the only thing you have in your head is, what is wrong with these people? And sometimes you feel like you're surrounded by idiots. That's I don't think it's a very exclusive thought coming from my mind. But the point is obviously, the title of the book is obviously ironic, because people are usually not idiots. There are a couple of idiots out there, 12 or 14, but they move around a lot, so you sort of run into them all the time. That's weird. But no, I don't think people are idiots. Basically, I think we are all the idiots in someone's story, and that's a problem, of course.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Is I may be surrounded by idiots, but the next person, I'm in that circle. I'm in the idiot, and I translate that into driving in Atlanta. We have a lot of crazy drivers here, and the person that's in front of you going too slow is an idiot, and then the person that blows past you going too fast is an idiot. Only you are going at the proper speed.
Exactly. This time, because next week you're the one who's doing one of these things, but you have a good reason, right? I mean, there's an old saying that goes something like this. I can't remember the exact phrase, but it's something like this: we judge ourselves by our intentions, but we judge other people by their actions. It's a huge difference there, because I know I was up to something good, it just didn't look like it, and I get that, but I had a good reason for what I did. But that idiot in that car, what a jerk. Take his license away. And that's just the way. And we all think the same thing. So hence, surrounded by it. It's actually sort of a descriptive title, I guess, in a way.
It is. It's a great title. I really love this. What drew me in initially, and then the book, of course, was phenomenal. In the opening, I really love. There's a couple of quotes I'm going to give. It says, "Communication happens on the listener's terms. By adjusting ourselves to how other people want to be treated, you become more effective in the way that you communicate." So that resonated certainly with me, but when you wrote it, what did you mean by that?
Well, I'm not sure the original thought comes from my own head, but you collect things and you learn things, and I have a lot of super fantastic mentors throughout my career. But I do think people hear what they hear and they see what they see, and when your message, whatever it is, doesn't really matter how brilliant you are, and I'm sure you are. In your case, Clint, it's obvious. But,
we all think that.
Yeah, exactly. No, but to be serious, we all think we have smart stuff to say. All right. But people, when everything is filtered through layers of years and experiences and attitudes and knowledge and educations and, I don't know, prejudice and whatever it is, what comes out is what it is. And there's not much you can do about it. And that's the problem. Why can't people listen? Well, they listen on their frequency. And there's a lot of fantastic, you can use a lot of cliche-like language for this, but they're not you. You are not them. They are not you. So you have to kind of pay attention to the other person in the room. If someone is sitting across the table, with folded arms and, and frowning forehead, you got to pay attention. You got to think this through. What is going on here? Something is off. What is it? And they think the same thing. What's wrong with that guy? And people hear what they hear. They see what they see. You can't change them, but you can change yourself. People come to me. I'm a mentor for a lot of people in really high places, and they say, how do I change my CEO or my CFO? How do I, if it's a chairman of the board? And I say, well, you can't do that. You see, you have to change yourself. You can ask them to change, and if they want to, they might do that if you give them a good enough reason. Well, how about I threaten them with firing them? Well, could be a good reason, but it's actually kind of aggressive. Let's work on it, right? Because there are things to be done there. People come to me and they say, okay, I've tried everything. It doesn't work. I'm going to sack this person. I say, everything, like in 100%? Have you tried everything? Really? Have you tried this? No. Have you tried that? No. Okay. Did you read a book on the topic? Yes. Did you follow the commands in the book? No. Okay. But maybe. I mean, who's fooling who here? Maybe you are the problem, sir. And that happens quite a lot, I would say.
I think what they're really saying is it's easier for me to fire this person than actually change.
Yes. And just imagine, that's a good point. Just imagine you want them to change, but you can't even change yourself. Now, if it's hard to change who you are, why on earth would you ask somebody else to change just like that? Or why do you think that you could change them if you can't even change yourself, which is the only person you have full authority over, really? This is, I mean, this is the reason why the world looks as it does. People don't understand each other. People don't listen. People do not, well, pay attention good enough, I would say. People don't accept too many differences. People are too judgmental too quickly. I mean, just look at where you are in the States right now. I don't envy the American citizen from this political, viewpoint. It doesn't really matter who you ask. Everyone is angry at somebody. And I think that's
Yeah.
sad. I don't think it has to be that way, actually.
No,
Or,
I agree.
or what do you think? What's your
No,
opinion?
I would like to see it be more congenial and where the other side isn't evil, and maybe we can have. We don't have to agree, but let's at least be able to have a cordial conversation. And I go away thinking, well, I don't agree with what Thomas said, but I understand why he thinks that way. But that's not the world we live in. Right, the world we live in right now is I surround myself by people who think just like I think, so I'm getting that positive reinforcement that my view is right. And a conversation doesn't really exist. It's a one-way dialogue where I make a point, and then say, if you disagree, you're an idiot. And it's just, you can never change my mind. And that's troubling for me because while I think I know a lot because I'm old, I certainly am open to talk to me. Then maybe I'll change my mind about something. Let me know. Maybe what you're saying is right and what I'm saying is wrong. I'm never too old to grow, but that's not how everybody thinks.
Well, you see, that was my take on this thing when I was a really young man, like in my early 20s. The definition of an idiot was really simple. If you agree with me, you're a great person. If you disagree, you're obviously an idiot. Like black and white. But you have to grow out of that. If you're a Democrat, you per se have to hate the Republicans and vice versa. No, you don't. You just don't. And okay, some people are obviously benefiting from creating this super huge divide like Grand Canyon between, and the difference is this maybe one issue, could be a social matter, could be, doesn't really matter, but you're probably agreeing on most of the stuff.
Yeah.
And I think it's really sad. I'm not a naive person at all, but I think we'd managed this better before, sitting down with the opposition saying, okay, give me your best argument. Let's have a chat. Instead of punching each other's face, let's just see if we can agree on something. I'm not trying to look like a cliche on two legs, but I think we have reached a point we shouldn't actually treat each other the way we do. And by we, I'm no better than anybody else, but I try to let's say, observe my own thinking and observe my own actions and reactions.
Yeah.
When I see
I
something
think that,
online, when I read when I read a news article, and I think, what a stupid journalist. Maybe he's got a point. I need to ponder this thing a little bit. So I'm in the same puddle as everybody else, obviously. So sorry, you were
yeah, I
saying.
think today it's all about the headlines. It's, let me get the most controversial headlines so I'll get people to click, and as opposed to actually having a discourse and a dialogue. And I certainly try to, there are people that I'll see in the social media that I totally disagree with. And my initial reaction is to just, mute that person or not see their stuff anymore. But then I force myself to not do that because I do want to know that there are people with different opinions than the ones that I have. So it's good to know that.
I've experimented with this with social media. I mean, I'm on social media. I'm even on TikTok. Don't ask me why, because I have not a clue. I'm really lousy at it. Instagram and whatever. LinkedIn is probably my sphere of. But the thing is, I have tried to not confront, but try to discuss with people from very different standpoints that I have, and they raise anger within seconds. Oh, you're just an idiot. What do you know,
Yeah.
stupidity? some author from Sweden. We checked you up. You're just an idiot. And then I politely asked them why I'm an idiot, and trying to really, really, really putting a real true effort in there to not offend anyone. In fact, I'm open to suggestions, give me your best argument and discuss it. Yeah, you're right. You got a point there. However, what about this? I'm confused. And usually if you just have the time and the patience to go through 20 or 30 or 100, comments, kind of dialogue, usually people say, interesting. Maybe you're not an idiot anyway. I don't agree with you still, but maybe you're a decent person. So you can make it happen, but you have to put some effort into it. But I think it could be done instead of just saying, what a fool, what a jerk. That's my point.
It's too easy to pop out of our foxhole, throw the grenade, and go back down, as opposed to standing up and actually looking you in the eye and having a conversation. That's a lot harder.
Right.
So, yeah, you mentioned DISC and something about colors. So let's jump into it. How did you first encounter the DISC model, and can you kind of give a snapshot of what DISC really is?
My first encounter was a painful one. Would you like to hear the story?
Sure, I'd love to.
Stories are good. I got my first managing position at the age of 24. I was a good sales rep. I was a top seller. I was at the top of the line. I knew everything. I could strike any deals with anyone. And then there was a job available, and I said to myself, why not take me? So I went to the recruiter and said, take me, which they, for some stupid reason, did. Because, if you're good at one thing, you're obviously good at everything. Because, when you're 24, what could possibly go wrong here? And I messed it up so badly. Ooh, the pain, Clint, the pain. I messed it up. Anything they came to me with, well, what about this? Well, just fix it. Well, how about that? Well, fix it. I don't know. I'm busy being managing her. So what do I know? And when you sit around the coffee table, your last day, when you finally sort of get rid of the whole situation, you sit around there, you think someone baked a cake and they hand you some kind of gift. They didn't give me anything. I gave them a plant and said, basically, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. And it got so awkward. One lady at the end of this horrible meeting, she felt bad for me. She said something like, well, it turned out a little bit better at the end. I don't know. It was horrible. And then the HR department called me up and said, would you fancy a personality test? And I said, sure, I'm a willing learner. Yeah, and they handed me the questionnaire, and I got the report, and I said, this is a horrible read. Is this how people perceive me? Yep. Is this what people see when I enter the room? Yep. Would you like to talk about it? And I said, I better do that, because I was on the what list, observation list, they call it, because I messed up badly. And that was a DISC analysis, behavioral assessment analysis, to use the correct term here. It's about the balance between introversion, extroversion, and task orientation and people orientation. So you get sort of a 2x2 matrix. And these are just the basics. Instead of people now immediately saying, there's got to be more than 4 types of people. Yes, you can combine them in 19,462 ways, algorithmically speaking. But you realize some people are more fast-forward thinkers, and some people are more social and influential, and some people are looking for stability, and some people are just analytical. So you get a sort of a sense of 4 kind of basic traits on how you could actually perceive a person when they sort of present themselves to you. And it helps you understand, again, I'm using the word basics because this is a basic tool. It is not 100% covering everything about an individual, and it doesn't make the claim either. So, but if you understand these basics, you can skip your 5.5 years psychology studies. You can actually learn how to deal with people on a daily basis, and that's, for me, is a great way to use it. But you can add a couple of stuff on top of this to make it, more reliable. But it's a good fundament to start understanding people and to start understanding yourself.
Now they in the book, I think they talk about colors as well. And so can you just give a brief overview of what the colors mean? You talked about the 4 quadrants, and then for contextual purposes, maybe there's a famous person. I know you did it a couple of times in the book of who you might think of when you think of red or yellow. And then if there's a surprise, like Mother Teresa I was very shocked that where she fell into that grid. So That'd be
Right.
cool to know too.
Yeah, right. Okay. The task-oriented extrovert is red. We call it red because for pedagogical reason, it's easier to remember a red and yellow behavior instead of a high D over an I with a low C. That's hard to recall when you. What's your profile? Was it ITPK, IENTJ? What was it now? Red and yellow. There you go. So Mother Teresa, and she has her critics as well. But she was kind of tough, dealing with the leaders of the world, saying, "You got to pay attention. You better send money." She had a great human purpose, I think. But she was red in her actions, kind of confrontative and dominant. And then you have the yellow trait, which is also extrovert, but people-oriented instead of task-oriented, which are the happy ones, the smiley ones, the shiny ones, the always smiling ones, like some extreme yellow person, like Jim Carrey, before he got serious.
Never met a stranger. Yeah.
Exactly. The sun is shining, and even if you say, "Well, it's kind of raining outdoors," yeah, but the sun is always shining somewhere, right? Isn't it? Yeah, you got to stay positive, right? Because life is beautiful. That's the yellow ones, and then you have the green persons. The green people, they are also people oriented, but on the introvert side, which makes them looking for stability. The team is more important than the individual. I said something that some people get angry. I actually said that probably if Jesus had a color, he was probably green because he took one for the team now, didn't he? And you don't have to be
Yeah.
religious to smile on this one because he kind of sort of sacrificed himself, which green people do because the team is more important than the individual. And the team could be your family, it could be the society, it could be the whole world. And then, of course, you have the blue trait, which is also introvert, but then task-oriented. So you get yourself an engineer and an accountant. And I usually use, just to make it funny, R2D2 from Star Wars. Or maybe 3PO telling everything. No, 3PO is the guy. Which one is a smaller robot? No, that's R2D2. The other
R2D2.
one is standing in this metal costume.
C3PO.
3PO, yeah. Oh, we can't do this. This is forbidden. This is illegal. You can't go over there. That's sort of his thing. But then you have a plethora of combinations, and that's where it gets interesting. But again, like when you bake a cake, you need to understand what is an egg, how much milk, and why is too much milk not good and too little milk isn't good. Because if you understand the fundamental ingredients, you can sort of start putting them together and make an interesting mixture of it. Most people show two colors. Some people show one color, like my wife, only red, nothing but red. 100% red. Well, 98, a bit furious, didn't I get 100? What a stupid test. I have three colors myself, so I'm harder to interpret. It's harder to read
Okay.
me, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I thought the colors were interesting because as I was reading through the book, to me, I took on the personality, right? So red was in my mind, red in the face and can be very volatile and explosive. And then the yellow was the sunny person, sunny disposition, always happy, life of the party, nothing's ever wrong. Green is ubiquitous. There's green everywhere in the world, and that's what you need because they just take carbon dioxide and make oxygen. They just get it done, right? And then the blue was the very kind of cold and introverted. So so the colors made sense to me at least.
Yeah, they do. I mean, red is fire, yellow is air or oxygen, really, interestingly enough. Green is the earth, and blue is obviously the ocean, the seas. And so this goes back to Aristotle. It goes back to the ancient Greek, because people have always divided each other into. I don't like to say put people in boxes, but try to divide and explain why people are different. So I think it's a good way to introduce someone to this kind of tool, let's say, instead of saying this is perfect, this is 100%. No, it isn't, but it's useful. And it makes you curious. I want to know more. Well, read another book and take a lecture and go online and go to YouTube or whatever, TED Talks, because there are so many things to digest out there, to learn more. And I mean, people are fascinating. I'm an ex-banker, and I can't do the math. I can't count, which sounds weird. That should be a bit scary, I guess. But I was in it because I was in a bank for 14 years because of people, because I love to work with people. I love to meet new people and see who are you? Tell me the story. Like you started with me. Okay, so what's the background here? Because it's interesting. Well, I think so because you asked me.
Yeah,
But the point is, everyone has an interesting story. You just have to pay attention to it, right? Am I right?
for sure.
Say
No,
yes.
I totally agree. Yes. Now you talked
You-
about baking the cake and needing certain ingredients and what, too much milk, not enough milk. And I'm just curious. So as a leader of a company, or maybe in my world as a leader of a team, how can we use the color system to build better teams? How do we know what ingredients go well with others and what to mix in and what to avoid?
Right. That is, of course, the right question. Well, I would say some people use the color profiling in recruitment. You can do that. I support it. However, you need to be a bit cautious because you can misuse it. It's more about who is using the tool itself than who is using the tool than the tool itself. Is what I meant to say. But some people say it's going to give you all the answers. No, it isn't, but it's going to give you the questions to ask. If someone comes in and you make this, you make them take the assessment, you tell, okay, you're a super extrovert, all right? This is an accounting firm or a law firm. Do we need someone who is the life of the party, or do we need somebody slightly more analytical? It could be, and here, the education is important, their track record and experience, obviously. I understand that. But if you have the wrong personality traits to begin with, it's going to be really hard to squeeze them into the box where you need them to be. Some people say, "Oh, you can be anything." No, you can't. That's just silly. Your mother was wrong. You can't be anything. You can be probably much more than you might expect if you don't work on yourself. But you can't be anything. That's just not true. I wanted to be when I was a young man. I wanted to play basketball. But I'm 6'2". Everybody else was like 7'2", so couldn't match. So very, very unfair. And then I wanted to drive Formula One cars, too tall, right? So life is treating me very unfairly. So I had to find an occupation where my height didn't matter. Writing books, no one cares. Is it short? Is it tall? Well, who cares? And this is actually not a joke because you can't be anything because you don't have the right, let's say traits within you. That's not to say you're less or more. That's not the point. I'm not evaluating anyone. That is not I'm not talking about individual value. But if you are a complete introvert, it's going to be hard to, for example, lead people. And introversion is something that you are usually born with. Usually born with. At the age of 24, you have reached sort of your height of personality development. You can learn new skills. You can learn how to negotiate, how to deal with conflicts. But you can't learn how to be an extrovert if you are an introvert. That is sort of within your DNA now. And some people don't like me saying that, but I believe that to be true. And when you build a team, you need to look for certain things. You need to look for if you have a team of only yellow people. Let's say you have a sales team. You have 9 super yellow people in there. Everyone is super, high on emotions and funny and giving stories and telling anecdotes, and they can convince anyone about anything. No one finds their papers and where's the contract. I don't know. I thought you should, who's calling now and where's my horse? Who are you people? Nothing, but they are super yellow because, wow, the energy. And then you're looking for a 10th individual. Would you like to balance this out a little bit? Maybe you should go for someone a little bit more stable. You know, that could be the case. The best teams are probably built by a variety of personalities. I would say here diversity is good. And I use diversity as a personality description. You need extroverts, introverts, task orientation, people orientation. You need people who can take a few punches. You need people who are stress tolerant. You need a lot of basic stuff there. The problem with these teams are you need a team leader who can deal with all the whole variety of individuals. So if you have a super great leader, you can probably put anyone in the team and make the best out of him or her. But if you have a leader who is yellow himself, he's going to look for more yellow people because those he at least understand. So there is a bit of a conundrum how to make it work. You need to really pay attention to these things, but you can do that.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting. If you get assigned to a new team, maybe you don't have a lot of experience with this group. that you might not know who's the red and who's the yellows, and you're not going to go in and say, what's your color? That's probably not the first thing out of your mouth because not everybody will have taken the test. But there have to be certain cues that you pick up on. You even mentioned a few earlier, like their furrowed brow. And I was really you talk about body language a little bit in the book, and I'm a big body language person, and I love the numbers. I'm an engineer by training, so I love numbers. And you said the English language has about 170,000 words, of which we use about 5,000 regularly. But body language has around 700,000 signals, which is just, to me, it was validating of what I had always thought, that I work better with somebody that I can actually see what their whole body language is telling me about how they feel.
Absolutely. And hence the problem with remote work, right? Because if you're not on Zoom or you have a bad hair day and you don't turn on the camera, you're going to lose, you're going to lose like 70% of the communication. Actually, the chat box doesn't help you at all. And the frowning forehead, that's a bit of a problem also, because if you look now, some people are watching this maybe, and some people are just listening, so they can't see what I do now. But if you get this line between my eyes here, and I look like this, now, is this good or bad? It depends on who you are, and it depends on who I am. Because if you interpret this as bad, you think I'm sort of suspicious or maybe even mad at you because something. Well,
Yeah.
maybe if I am red, then this is irritation, annoyment. Why are you so slow, basically? But if I'm blue, I'm the engineer type. This means focus and concentration. Now this is getting really interesting. So body
Yes.
language can trick you completely. When people say, oh, this gesture means this and this gesture means that. Well, maybe. That's why I don't put too much body language in the book. There's a new edition coming this fall. That's going to be a separate chapter because I have revised it and expanded it quite a lot. But the thing is, body language. There are very few things that you can count on always. There are a few, but not as many as you might think. So if you understand the profile, you can look for certain things in body language. If I lean forward, is this good or bad? Well, it depends. If I'm red, I'm going to maybe punch you on the nose now because you kind of annoy me. But if I'm green, it's a friendly gesture. Now I'm leaning into the conversation. All of a sudden, I trust you. This is great. If I fold my arms, is it good or is it bad? It depends. There are so many of these signs, micro expressions in the face and so on, eye rolling, could mean contempt, but it can also mean something else. It depends on so many factors. And that's why it's good to understand the basics of a human's behavior, because a person's behavior, because if you know who they are, you also know how to interpret lots of things, the choice of words, how quickly they speak. If they are pausing, should you just fill in the gap or should you be quiet? It depends. If a red person stops talking, he's done, he's finished. If a blue person stops for 30 seconds, it could just be his thinking, and all of a sudden something interesting is going to come out. But you don't know that unless you pay attention. So, yeah.
Based on what you said, if a yellow person stops talking for 30 seconds, you better check the pulse to make sure they're still
check
alive.
the pulse. He's in a bad situation. Something is going on there, because they can breathe inwards and still keep talking. It's funny. I have a sister. She's painfully yellow. She's so yellow. It's really hard to describe. When I describe her on lectures and so on, people mainly say, "Yeah, you sort of exaggerate." No, I'm not. You have every man on the planet has heard this. You don't listen to me. You don't pay attention. It goes in through one ear and out through the other ear. We have all heard this, right?
Yeah.
My brother-in-law, who says about my sister, who is the yellow one, she says, "With you, dear, it goes in through both ears and out through your mouth." That's a beautiful story, but it's also true. And she can make anyone feel fantastic about anything, If there's a thunderstorm, yeah, let's make some cozy, let's turn up the fireplace in here and let's read stories to each other and play a game. And she makes people feel good, just good all the time. It's amazing. And she's so positive, it's almost painful. I don't know how she does it.
Sometimes
I
it's
don't
too
know.
bright.
It's just amazing.
Well, that concludes part one of my conversation with Thomas Erikson, behavioral expert, keynote speaker, and best-selling author of Surrounded by Idiots. Coming up in part 2, Thomas gives advice for effectively communicating with someone that has a different color profile than your own.
Be generous. That's the best way to phrase it. Be generous, even though you might think that you're right, and maybe you are, but that's not the point. No one likes to be proven wrong. They're going to hate you for it, and you're going to end up in a worse place than before. So be generous. I have misunderstood you completely. Please forgive me, but I want to learn more about you. Who are you really? Let's go for lunch. And there you go. And again, most people are willing to participate.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.